I came up with another movie pitch.
Okay, what is it?
Okay, so it's a deli, like a Jewish deli, and it's its last day open, and they're in Japan. So it didn't translate to Japan, and the title is called The Last Ham on Rye.
Rewatching Highlander made me anxious to revisit the sequels again.
Yeah,
because it's been a minute.
Yeah, seeing Highlander and Spawn so close together made me really appreciate the storytelling of Highlander, where it's like, oh, you give this space and like you kind of dole this out like in a way where this crazy concept is it's very easy to kind of like get accustomed to. Whereas with Spawn, it's like, here's everything you need to know, and we're going to say it over voiceover in the first 30 seconds. And if you didn't catch it, then you're lost for the rest of the movie. So.
Well, I love that Highlander has like an opening crawl, but it's just like in the beginning, there was immortals, and we're among you. That's about it. Here's the movie. it's not really, kind of just giving you a little bit of background.
Totally, yeah. So, Mike, what's your history with Highlander franchise?
So I think it started with the TV series. Actually, I was a big fan of that growing up. It's not great, but I still love it. I have it on my shelf. I started actually like during the pandemic, started rewatching it. So I think Duncan MacLeod was my first MacLeod, and then through the series, discovered the movies. So yeah, I discovered that when I was a kid, and I think like it was just right on my alley because it's got swords and decapitation and you know what I mean. Like you're right, exactly. That kick-ass Queen song.
I've slowly grown to become a fan of Christopher Lambert. He came on my like I knew of him from Highlander, and then like in the 90s. He was showing up in stuff like Night Moves and The Hunted and things like that. So he was always around, but Mortal Kombat with him as Raiden was my intro to him. And like,
me too.
Very fun. It's a very fun performance, but it's kind of it's a very odd take on that character. And I always kind of thought of him as sort of like a punchline type of a performer. And then as I've gotten older and I kind of have embraced just cheesiness in a good way, the whole his sincerity and earnestness has really, it's kind of like he was always there for me. He was always like waiting for me to enjoy his work, and I just had to get over myself and like be on board with it. And I think you need this type of performer to sell this type of material. And I was happy to read in the IMDb trivia that like him and Connery got along really well. And you can tell that like in their section of the movie together. That was my favorite stretch of the movie by far. It was the whole stuff with Connery, which I guess isn't too big of a surprise because Sean Connery is Sean Connery. But he definitely like comes into the movie at just the right time, because I think I enjoyed the flashbacks a lot more than the modern day at that time, 1986 stuff. Like I enjoyed some of that, but like when they were going back to his first wife and like their history together and how he stayed with her even though he was advised not to, and him learning how to be a Highlander and learning what the quickening was and everything. And Connery is dressed up like the puppet from Labyrinth who looks like Zorro and stuff. Like all that is great, and I really enjoyed it.
Feels like a big music video.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because Mulcahy is a music video director for most of us.
Right, exactly. It's so stylized, and like you said, with the windows breaking and stuff. Yeah. No,
I was thinking that Lambert has that, like you were talking about his sort of like his presence and stuff, and it's almost like a Dolph Lundgren-y, Schwarzenegger-y kind of thing. Not that he's like a meathead, but like that he's got that sort of otherworldly. It's just because probably just because English is not his first language, and so he's got a little bit of that sort of practiced. He's doing charming things in the script, and he's having these charming conversations with the female characters and stuff, and some of his line readings are just like they're just crazy. Like they're just
Yeah, I read he accepted the part and the producers didn't know that he didn't know English and he had
Yeah.
to learn English for
Wow.
this movie. Yeah.
And like some of his line readings are like it's like he's reading them phonetically. It's like Temple of
Yeah.
Doom, but it almost makes it better. Like it
Yep.
almost makes it like more other. So I thought that was really cool. I was really fascinated by his performance. I think Clancy Brown is really great in this movie too. Like I think the three like really lead male performances I think are pretty great.
Yeah, I might be giving the movie too much credit, but I appreciated that Lambert was so weird and Clancy Brown was so weird. And it's like, yeah, these guys have been like are around for centuries. Like they're doing stuff just to amuse themselves at times.
Yeah.
It's like
The story is, the movie is one of those where you can tell this was written. I'm just looking at the credits and stuff. Gregory Wyden wrote this as maybe a story, I think as a story or a prose story or something as a college assignment, and then ended up getting bought and turned into a screenplay.
Mhm.
And you can tell because it's so many ideas. Like this is just one of those movies like bursting with ideas, and it doesn't really have like it doesn't all work, as a movie, like but some of it is like you can see how they made a series. You know what I mean? You can see how they made a TV series. You can see how they made sequels and stuff because there's just so much room to explore this. So you could just literally just go in any direction. There's this ancient, tradition of immortals, and they don't know they're immortals at first, and they learn about this tournament and blah 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 and all that.
But I also, to go back to the casting, I find it interesting and smart. I love the idea that they cast a Frenchman as someone from Scotland and a Scottish person as the Spaniard.
And I had forgotten. I thought when I turned it on, I saw the Canon logo. I thought to myself, "Oh wait, I didn't realize, or maybe I didn't remember." And then I did more research and realized it's not a Canon movie the way we know Canon movies. It was just a movie that was distributed in the U.S. by Canon. Because I'm watching this, I'm going, this is a lot for a Canon film. Like it's like 19 million in 86, 85. So I'm like, this movie looks, they're going for it. You've got big helicopter shots on crosses, and you've got all these crazy things.
Mulcahy was an interesting director because like he went from music videos to Highlander was kind of the movie that he really popped with, and then he had Highlander 2, which is I'm assuming similarly like very over the top and just kind of out there. And then he did Ricochet, which is one of the crazy like, and that's saying something like of Joel Silver action movies, it's maybe the craziest one. And I think part of the disappointment I had with the Shadow that he did with Alec Baldwin was that it was so like dour. If I'm remembering it correctly, it just felt kind of like very polite in comparison to some other movies. And I don't know, he's just an interesting filmmaker, and I think it's like such a great fit. So, Mike, do you have a favorite Queen song from the Highlander soundtrack?
Yeah, it's the first one, the
Prince of the Universe.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. I watched the Siskel and Ebert review for it, and they weren't big fans of the movie really at all, but like they were talking about how they both saw it at like this Avco Embassy Theater in LA, and at the time in the 80s it was like known as being the best presentation you could ever see for a movie, like, and they were just like, and Siskel said the same thing. He's just like, I'm watching it in the sound design in the first scene, and I'm like, this is going to be something really, really great. Yeah. And then he's like, and then I didn't really. But, yeah.
I like this movie's approach to the story. I was texting friends last night, and I was saying like, Goop's thinking about like, oh, we used to watch this a lot when we were kids and stuff, and we used to think it was just really cool. The idea of being a Highlander is so cool, and like it's got all that sword and sorcery stuff we like, but it has like an edge to it. And I was watching it last, I was like, no, this is like a really sad movie about loneliness and how bad it would suck to live forever. Like how bad, like I was having this like existential crisis while I'm watching it. I'm like, no, this is like a really sad movie, like just about this guy's pain and his heartbreak and loss and all that. But it's tempered in such an interesting style that it presents that sort of hero's journey in that way of like overcoming that loss and overcoming that and sort of using it, and his reward, obviously, not to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen it, but his reward is sort of thematically connected to that, which also makes me curious about the sequels, but I understand that I'll figure that out later.
I can't wait till you guys watch the second one.
Yeah.
Just the cast alone gets me excited for that, because you like are adding Virginia Madsen, Michael Ironside, and everything like that. I just can't wait.
Yeah, I remember very little of that movie, so I'm excited to rewatch it. But I also it's one of those movies where you can tell it came from something that somebody had thought about, like that the world had been fleshed out, you know, that in his original story, like maybe there's some stuff they changed for the movie or whatever, but it was an idea that somebody sat and processed through. It wasn't, you know, wasn't like you know, the band's second album that gets written in the studio by a producer. You know, it was like somebody really sat down and thought about it, which is why it's such an interesting and sort of it's also something I could see, like, not to give anybody any ideas, but I could see somebody, one of these streamers coming back with another series like this, and it just follows like a different person, you know, like a different, which, you know, I assume a lot of the sequels do. There's just so much room there. It's one of those really golden concepts that you're just like, wow, that's money in the bank. Like we can do anything with this.
Yeah, no, I love that. I had this too when I was like researching Spawn, where I'm just like, it's like there's this appreciation for these things and everybody kind of just like keeps a lid on it. But then when they get permission from someone where they're just like, I really like Spawn, then out of the woodworks, everybody comes and is just like, did you know that this is like one of the treasures of the 90s and everything? And I feel like Highlander was like that too, because like, you know, not to, you know, pat ourselves on the back, but like when we announced like, hey, we're going to do Highlander, and that's more just because like, at least for me selfishly, like I haven't seen most of the movies and I've always meant to, like people were really excited about that. So like I think there's a lot of just love for this franchise, and it makes sense because I mean it's really, there's a lot of room to play with in this world, and I think they do a really good job of, you know, it's not cynical, they're just interested in like the machinations of all this.
Do you guys think this is like a good action movie, like in terms of 86, like in terms of the era? Like, do you like the action in this?
I do. I for the most part, like I like the I think the sword fighting, everybody seems capable.
Yeah.
And then like that translates to me. So I don't know. I think I'm just a sucker for. I didn't realize like how much I'm a sucker for. I think like swords and.
your big point today is swords, Mike.
Yeah.
But guys, I love swords.
Right. Who knew? But no, I was thinking that throughout watching it this time. I don't think it's a game changer. There's any real super memorable set pieces, but I think for the most part, the action is pretty good.
I do like how easily they're just like, oh yeah, that Japanese sword, it's worth $1 million. Like it's just like immediately they're like, this is priceless, this is worth so much, this Japanese sword. And I love that whole backstory where it's like you said, Mike, where, you know, these guys have been moving around the world because like, why not, you know, you're immortal. So like Connery was just like, yeah, I was married to a Japanese princess and her dad made me this sword, and I'm just like, that's a movie right there, I want to watch this movie. Yeah. Do you think You Only Live Twice is secretly a Highlander movie, and Connery's just like, no, I'm not necessarily immortal, I only live twice, and then that's why he's in Japan.
It's connection with Japanese girls. Yeah, definitely. Yep. All right, so next week we're going to talk about Highlander 2, The Quickening.
Yes, I can't wait. I've been meaning to watch this movie for 31 years. Until next time.
There can only be one.
Well done.
Episode.
Yeah. Movie pitch. All Kate ever wanted was to have legs. Now, after a successful surgery, she's going to show the world who's cool. Title, Ice Kate.